Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna. Welcome to A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Ukraine and Russia peace talks move into a second day with no sign of a breakthrough. Peru's President José Giri was ousted after just 4 months over a secret meeting scandal. And Tehran says agreement reached on guiding principles after US-Iran talks conclude in Geneva. Day one of talks in Geneva ended quietly under the shadow of continued strikes on the ground in Ukraine. As US-mediated talks got underway between Kyiv and Moscow, fresh Russian strikes hit several regions, damaging energy infrastructure in the south and forcing civilians back into shelters in the capital.
Negotiators from the United States, Ukraine and Russia met in Switzerland for the first of 2 days of US-mediated discussions on Tuesday. The Geneva talks are being held behind closed doors with no immediate signs of progress. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said no announcement should be expected and confirmed discussions would continue on Wednesday without media access. Meanwhile, overnight Russian airstrikes across several regions severely damaged the power network in the southern port city of Odessa. It's left tens of thousands without heat and water, according to President Volodymyr Zelensky.
The team must definitely raise the issue of these strikes, first and foremost with the American side, which had proposed to both us and Russia that we refrain from attacks. Ukraine is ready. We do not need this war. We always act in a mirror response. We defend our state and our independence. At the same time, we are ready to move quickly toward a just agreement to end the war.
As diplomacy unfolded, air raid sirens sent residents in Kyiv into underground metro stations. Oksana Revyakina, displaced from Melitopol, says she no longer trusts Russia.
The missiles are flying at us again. Thank God there weren't that many Shaheds today. The missiles are scary. We live on the 9th floor. We want to save our lives. My husband is in the army now. We haven't had any contact with him for a very long time. I really want it all to end as soon as possible because it's very difficult. It's difficult for everyone.
Alina Yemet says repeated rounds of negotiations have left many doubtful of any change.
There have been so many of these meetings, so much talk about a ceasefire. Belief is not very strong, but people are exhausted. They should at least be given a little rest. These constant air alerts, air attacks, the poor guys on the front line, I feel very sorry for them.
The Geneva talks follows 2 earlier rounds in Abu Dhabi that failed to produce a breakthrough. The central dispute is around territory. Russia is demanding that Ukraine cede the remaining 20% of the eastern Donetsk region it does not control, a condition Kyiv rejects. Russia currently occupies around 20% of Ukraine's territory overall, with the 4th anniversary of the full-scale invasion approaching on the 24th of February. Analysts say deep divisions over land and long-term security guarantees leave little expectation of a swift breakthrough.
European Union finance ministers have approved national defence investment plans worth about €74 billion. The funding falls under the bloc's SAFE instrument, which is designed to provide low-interest loans for the joint procurement of priority military equipment. Anita Sharma brings us more from the Netherlands.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where the bloc's finance ministers approve a new wave of national defence investment plans worth about 74 billion euros. It falls under the 150 billion euro Security Action for Europe, or SAFE loan scheme. The latest green light covers plans from Estonia, Greece, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, and Finland. It's in addition to an initial 38 billion euros in projects endorsed last week for 8 other member states. In total, 16 of the 19 countries that applied for support under SAFE now have their plans approved, with the Czech Republic, France, and Hungary still waiting for clearance before loans can be signed, and pre-financing of up to 15% can start to flow. SAFE is a flagship EU instrument designed to make long-term, low-interest loans available for joint procurement of priority military equipment. That includes ammunition, missiles, and artillery systems to drones, air and missile defense, cyber and electronic warfare capabilities. Hardware purchased under the scheme must be largely European-made, with no more than 35% of component costs coming from outside the EU or Ukraine, a condition meant to channel demand into Europe's own defense industrial base. In parallel, defense ministers also cleared the way for a landmark agreement with Canada that will allow Canadian companies and products to take part in procurement financed by SAFE. That makes Canada the first non-European country to join the program. The Council's decision authorizes the EU to sign the bilateral deal, but it will only be formally concluded once the European Parliament gives consent. Brussels hopes the combination of oversubscribed demand from 19 member states and the opening to a G7 partner like Canada will unlock far larger private investment and help deliver the Commission's wider Readiness 2030 goal of mobilizing up to 800 billion euros for European defense by the end of this decade. For governments with weaker credit ratings, the Commission's backing should mean cheaper borrowing and faster access to urgently needed kit as they race to plug capability gaps exposed by Russia's war in Ukraine. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced plans to increase the proportion of weapons Canada purchases from domestic firms. He said the strategy is designed to strengthen the country's sovereignty rather than move it towards isolation. At present, Canada spends 70% of its weapons budget on products from the United States, a figure Carney said is too high. Under the new defence strategy, the government wants Canadian companies eventually to account for 70% of weapons procurement instead.
We have committed to double our defence expenditures by the end of this decade. And that amounts to an additional $80 billion over the next 5 years. To those ends, as the Minister mentioned, we are announcing Canada's first ever defence industrial strategy. It's a bold plan to get our armed forces what they need when they need it. It's a bold plan to scale Canadian defence companies and to put hundreds of billions of dollars into strategic sectors of our economy while creating over 125,000 high-paying jobs across Canada.
Lawmakers in Peru have voted in favour of ousting President José Gerri. The voting took place on Tuesday after a scandal involving undisclosed meetings with a Chinese businessman came to light via CCTV footage. Here's more on that story.
Peru's President José Gerri has been removed from office by a vote in Congress just 4 months into his term, becoming the country's third consecutive leader to be ousted. 75 lawmakers voted in favour of his removal following a scandal over undisclosed meetings with a Chinese businessman. 24 voted against the motion, while 3 abstained.
Following the approval of the motions of censure against the President of the Congress of the Republic, who is also acting President of the Republic, Mr. José Enrique Gerri, the presiding board declares the office of President of the Congress of the Republic vacant, and consequently, the office of President of the Republic is also vacant.
The controversy, dubbed Schiffergate after a local term for Chinese restaurants, began last month. Gerri was filmed arriving late at night at a restaurant to meet Chinese businessman Zhihua Yang. He owns retail stores and holds a concession for an energy project. The meeting had not been publicly disclosed. Although Gerri acknowledged the meetings, he denied any wrongdoing, but said he would respect the outcome of the vote. Some Peruvians welcomed Congress's decision, and others feel he should have completed his term.
Very good. Long live Peru. We're always standing, never kneeling. Now I tell my suffering people, which have been subjected to thousands of forms of slavery, never again, not one more vote to these far-right parties. We will not trust them at all because they've proven their immorality and incapacity.
My opinion is that I'm not happy with what they're doing to the president by removing him from office. He should have finished his term. And how does the Peruvian people end up? How does it look? All the political stability is being lost. Look, another president is going to come in when there was already little time left for him to go. He should have completed it, but unfortunately, he has enemies against him.
Under the Constitution, the current head of Congress, Fernando Rospigliosi, would be next in line to assume the presidency, but he has declined to do so. Lawmakers must now elect a new head of Congress who will automatically take on the role of president. Elections are scheduled for the 12th of April.
Tehran and Washington wrapped up another round of indirect nuclear discussions in Geneva, keeping the channel open for further dialogue. With cautious signals from both sides, attention now turns to when and how the next phase of talks will unfold. Here's more.
Iran and the United States say they made cautious progress during a second round of nuclear talks held in Geneva on Tuesday. Speaking after the meeting, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said discussions were serious and more constructive than in the previous round. He said both sides reached an understanding on key guiding principles, but warned that more work is needed. Araghchi also stressed that progress does not mean a final deal is close.
According to these principles, and as a result of the good offices by our friendly countries in the region, which we are very grateful, a new window of opportunity has opened, under which we had the second round of the negotiations with the United States earlier today here in Geneva. We are hopeful that negotiation will lead to a sustainable and negotiated solution which can serve the interest of relevant parties and the broader region.
It's great to have you. And I do want
US Vice President J.D. Vance also described the talks as positive in some ways, telling Fox News that President Donald Trump is seeking a solution. US officials said further discussions are needed on several details.
I think the president has a lot of options. We do have a very powerful military. The president's shown a willingness to use it. He also has a remarkable diplomatic team. He's shown a willingness to use that too. And so what the president has been very clear with the Iranians, and actually I just talked to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner this morning about some of their negotiations, is the United States has certain red lines. Our primary interest here is we don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. We don't want nuclear proliferation.
Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Esmail Baghaei said Tehran has shared its positions on the nuclear issue, sanctions relief, and a framework for a possible agreement. A senior Iranian official told Reuters that progress depends on Washington avoiding what Tehran views as unrealistic demands and showing seriousness about lifting economic sanctions. Iran is expected to present more detailed proposals within 2 weeks. No date has been set for the next round of talks.
Meanwhile, the United States has deployed more than 50 fighter jets to the Middle East over the past 36 hours as part of a broader buildup of air and naval forces near Iran. Axios reports citing a US official. Independent flight trackers observed multiple F-16 Fighting Falcon, F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning II aircraft heading toward the region. The military movements came amid indirect negotiations between Washington and Tehran over Iran's nuclear program, raising tensions as diplomatic efforts continue. Iran is proposing another round of talks in 2 weeks' time. And Iran's Revolutionary Guards shut Hormuz Strait for a few hours during naval drills as Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei strongly warned against US military buildup in preparation for a war with Iran, despite of the renewed indirect nuclear negotiations in Geneva. Our correspondent brings us more from Tehran.
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy shut partially the strategic Hormuz Strait connecting Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman. The move came during the second day of its war games on Tuesday, according to state media broadcasts. The drills, codenamed Smart Control of the Strait of Hormuz, in one of the world's most critical energy corridors, transiting a significant share of global oil exports, were staged on Monday ahead of the second round of renewed Iran-US mediated nuclear talks in Geneva. As Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards shut the critical strait for a few hours for what official media reported as a move to secure safety of passing vessels, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei strongly warned against U.S. military buildup in the region. Addressing a public meeting on Tuesday, he slammed U.S. military enforcement at its bases in the region, including dispatching of 2 aircraft carriers. Meantime, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that Iran's right to peaceful use of nuclear energy is non-negotiable, also warning that backlashes of an aggression will not be limited to Iran. He made the statement in a speech at the annual conference on disarmament in Geneva, hours after conclusion of the second round of renewed mediated nuclear negotiations with the United States. Prior to his speech at the UN's European headquarters, he termed as good progress his talks with US negotiators, also stating that productive discussions were held with IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi on eve of the Iran-US negotiations. Iran's Araghchi also said that no specific date has been set for the next round of negotiations. He added, it was agreed that both sides will work on the drafts of a potential agreement and then exchange these drafts. After that, we will determine a date for the third round of talks. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, Foreign News.
Millions of Muslims around the world are preparing to begin the holy month of Ramadan, with some countries starting fasting on Wednesday and others a day later, depending on the sighting of the new moon. Across the Middle East, South Asia and Southeast Asia, cities have been illuminated and markets crowded as communities ready themselves for a month of fasting, prayer and reflection.
The crescent moon has been sighted across parts of the Muslim world, marking the beginning of Ramadan, a month of fasting, prayer and reflection for nearly 2 billion people. From Jerusalem's old city to the streets of Karachi and the markets of Jakarta, cities are glowing with lanterns and lights. Shop fronts shimmer with decorations, families stock their kitchens with dates and sweets, and mosques prepare for the first evening prayers. In the West Bank, a giant illuminated crescent was raised near Hebron in hopes of drawing families back together. In Yemen, workers repaint mosque domes and worshippers open their Qurans in quiet preparation. In Damascus and Baghdad, believers gathered to watch the sky as the new moon appeared. While some countries began fasting on Wednesday after confirming the moon's sighting, others will start a day later, reflecting the centuries-old tradition of observing the lunar calendar. Across continents, despite economic hardship and conflict in some regions, the arrival of Ramadan brings a familiar rhythm. Dawn meals before sunrise, long days of fasting, and nights filled with prayer, charity and community. As lanterns flicker and the first Tarawih prayers begin, a month of spiritual renewal and shared devotion has quietly taken hold.
Now we'll take a short break, and when we return we'll assess what agreement on guiding principles means for the future of US-Iran nuclear diplomacy. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. The United States and Iran have concluded a second round of nuclear negotiations in Geneva, with both sides announcing agreement on guiding principles for a potential deal. While no final agreement has been reached, the talks mark a significant diplomatic development amid earlier threats of military escalation. Now, let's bring in our guest, Gregory Matthew, political analyst from Stockholm, Sweden. Gregory, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lilica. Good to see you.
Same here. Now, let's begin with clarity, Gregory. What do guiding principles typically entail in nuclear diplomacy, and are they symbolic or substantive?
Yeah, in nuclear diplomacy, guiding principles are usually the political guardrails. That means we know now what each side is ready to trade, what is off limit, what are the red lines, and there is a basic structure of a deal. So this is not symbolic, this is a step forward, but this is not a deal yet. This is absolutely not a deal. And usually when you come to a mission, you have to be ready to trade something. You cannot obtain 100% of what you want. So this is where we are now. But as for every negotiation, until there is no agreement on everything, basically there is no agreement at all.
Okay. And what are the likely components of these principles? Are we looking at enrichment caps, inspection regimes, sanctions sequencing?
It is, it is not communicated, but we may imagine that these are the kind of things that are discussed indeed on the table. A level cap, a stockpile reduction, a centrifuge constraint. That means how many centrifuge the Iranian regime would be authorized to have. A verification mechanism. Usually in the past it was the IAEA that was in charge. We remember that the inspector of IAEA had some difficulties to access the nuclear plant in the past, so maybe there will be new elements for that. And the sanctions logic, because as you know, Iran is under heavy sanction, and they made clear that they would be ready to make some step in exchange of some reduction of sanctions.
And Gregory, which principle would be hardest to implement?
As I said, everything is hard to implement in a deal, and when there is no agreement on every detail, and everything is in the details, there is no agreement. So we may remember that it was a deal in the past, in 2015, right? That Mr. Trump defined as a completely useless paper, and he scrapped it out. And so now we are renegotiating something that has been negotiated for years. It took like more than 10 years to negotiate the first, let's say, Iran-Nuclear deal. So we don't know how long it will take, and we certainly don't have a vision on how it can be successfully implemented.
And Gregory, how does this compare to the original JCPOA style? Are we seeing revival, revision, or a replacement perhaps?
Well, it's a kind of a revival with potentially new elements. It's not a replacement, it's presented as a new deal, which may be in the package some other things. But what is clear for the Iranian side is that it doesn't touch the missile capacity, the ballistic missile capacity. So we are only speaking about the nuclear production here, and we don't speak about any ballistic capacity for Iran. They made clear this is a sovereign capacity for the country, and they are not ready to discuss anything of this kind at the moment. So Iran is saying that it needs to develop civil nuclear power plant. As we speak, the electricity in Iran, 2% of the electricity production in Iran is made with nuclear power plant. There is one nuclear power plant actually in place. So we don't know really why they need so many centrifuges, why they need to dig it out 120 meters underground if it's only for civilian use. And all this needs to be clarified and monitored in the future.
So, Gregory, President Trump previously warned of consequences if talks failed. We've heard this time and time again from him. Does today's or yesterday's outcome rather represent diplomatic restraint, or are we looking at recalibrated pressure?
This is the story of the stick and the carrot, right? So it is important there are diplomatic talks and that the line is not cut, that you continue to speak with your, let's say, enemy. At the same time, we can see that there is a substantial deployment of forces in the region. There is already one aircraft carrier that is there, the US Lincoln. There is a second one on its way. And all this negotiation and diplomatic talks may also be a trick to be able to deploy more forces. You know, normally when you come to a negotiation table, you don't come with a gun on the table. But this is what is happening right now. There is a deterrent position of the US. They say, okay, we are keeping all in hands, and we have multiple alternatives. Yesterday, G.D. Vance, the vice president, said, we keep all in hands. And there are different options that we have, and we keep all options open, including the military intervention. And at the same time, Iran is also showing muscles and making military exercise in the Gulf and showing that and stating that they would be ready to respond to any attack from any side.
And from Tehran's perspective, what domestic political risks accompany any concession on enrichment?
You know, in Tehran, there are potentially the hardliner, and a diplomatic deal would be maybe perceived by those hardliner as a diminution of Iran power. They would maybe take advantage of this to contest the establishment. For the domestic and for the Iranian people, it also has implication. If the deal is to lower the sanction and to try to make a better life for each and every Iranian citizen, that could be a good thing. But the month of January event showed that the power and the regime has not much interest of protecting their own citizens. They killed no less than dozens of thousands of them after some protest in the street. So the power and for the system in place, I think they are winning time. Iranians are very good in negotiation. It is a very civilization. They have very seasoned diplomats. They have very seasoned people at the table. And on the US side, we have the same Witkoff, Kushner binom. And the Iranians are potentially winning some time, and they are expert in doing so.
And Gregory, Israel has consistently opposed concessions that allow enrichment capability. How might Jerusalem interpret this development, this latest round of talks?
Well, we know that Mr. Netanyahu was in Washington recently and is pushing for a more hardcore approach of the situation. If the 12 days war could have been prolonged, it would have been favorable for that. From Israel perspective, it should not be forgotten that one of the main statement or the core of the program Iran and its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, is the obliteration of Israel. So they see it with a different eyes, and they don't think that a deal with Iran is possible, and they certainly don't trust the Iranian regime to be fair in the implementation of such a deal.
Okay, Gregory, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. Thanks for your analysis.
You're welcome, Delika.
We'll take a break now, and when we return, we'll take a look at major stories from the region.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Afghanistan's authorities say they have released 3 Pakistani soldiers who were captured during cross-border clashes last year, in a move mediated by Saudi Arabia and timed ahead of the holy month of Ramadan. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
Afghanistan's spokesperson says the 3 Pakistani soldiers captured during fighting along the border in October 2025 have now been released and handed over to a Saudi delegation in Kabul. According to the spokesperson, the move was made in line with the policy of maintaining positive relations with all countries and as a gesture marking the arrival of Ramadan, which he described as a month of mercy and forgiveness. He added that the release also came in response to a request from Saudi Arabia, which has recently hosted talks between the two sides. The soldier had been detained on October 12 during some of the worst cross-border fighting since the Taliban returned to power in 2021. Dozens of people were reported killed in those clashes, which led to a fragile ceasefire but failed to produce a lasting political understanding between Kabul and Islamabad. The release comes at a time of continued tension between the two neighbors. Key border crossings along the more than 2,600-kilometer frontier have been repeatedly shut, disrupting trade and the movement of people. Pakistan has accused Afghan authorities of harboring militants responsible for attacks inside its territory, a charge Kabul has consistently denied. The handover mediated by Saudi Arabia is being seen as a possible confidence-building step, though broader political and security disputes between the two countries remain unresolved. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Azerbaijan will support the construction and renovation of schools that have been destroyed or damaged in Syria, according to the Ministry of Science and Education of Azerbaijan. Strategic Partnership Agreement on restoring Syria's educational infrastructure was signed at ESESCO headquarters in Rabat on Tuesday by Azerbaijan's Minister of Science and Education, Emin Amrullayev, Syria's Education Minister, Dr. Mohammed Abdulrahman Turko, and ESESCO Director General Dr. Salim bin Mohammed Al Malik. Under the agreement, Azerbaijan will support the restoration of educational infrastructure in Syria, including the construction of nearly 10 new school buildings and the major renovation of around 100 damaged schools. Baku's hosting an international conference bringing together nearly 60 experts and think tank representatives from Azerbaijan and Central Asian countries. Discussions are centered on strengthening strategic dialogue, enhancing connectivity through the Middle Corridor and Trans-Caspian routes. Our correspondent Gulchin Kojalieva has more on the event.
An international conference titled C6 One Region Shared Future Enhancing Strategic Dialogue is taking place in Baku, bringing together nearly 60 experts and think tank representatives from Central Asia and Azerbaijan. The discussions reflect a new stage in regional cooperation following Azerbaijan's accession to the Central Asian consultative process, effectively expanding the format from C5 to C6. Participants say the shift signals growing efforts to build a more integrated strategic space across the Caspian region. Key topics include strengthening political dialogue, boosting economic connectivity, and enhancing cooperation on security and development. A major focus is the Middle Corridor and wider Trans-Caspian links, which experts describe as increasingly important for connecting Central Asia to European markets. Analysts note that the evolving C6 format could play a larger role in shaping regional integration and long-term strategic coordination. This is Gulchin Kojalieva with Khalid Aliyev for A News.
Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have launched a pilot cargo corridor with China. The first freight train departed from China to Tajikistan carrying consumer goods and construction equipment. Uzbek-Chinese firm UTK International Logistics is operating the pilot train. The freight train consists of 8 40-foot containers. It departed from the city of Lanzhou in northwestern China and will pass through Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan en route to Dushanbe 2 station in Tajikistan. The transit route stretches over a distance of 3,500 kilometres and takes between 18 to 20 days to complete. The trial transport corridor is part of an agreement to deepen regional cooperation between the countries. The European Parliament is preparing to reopen discussions on a long-stalled partnership agreement with Turkmenistan as the country's president plans an official visit to Brussels. The talks come amid renewed diplomatic engagement and growing interest in energy cooperation. Our correspondent has more.
Turkmenistan's President Serdar Berdimuhamedov is planning an official visit to Brussels as the European Parliament moves closer to discussing a long-delayed partnership agreement with the Central Asian state. The trip is expected to include meetings with EU leaders and senior officials. At the same time, lawmakers in Brussels are preparing to revisit the ratification of the Comprehensive Partnership and Cooperation Agreement, a document that has remained on hold for more than 2 decades. Until now, relations between the two sides have been governed by a temporary trade agreement. And according to the EU's ambassador to Turkmenistan, the issue is expected to be discussed during an interparliamentary meeting in early March. The agreement has remained unratified since 1998, largely due to long-standing concerns within the European Union over the human rights situation in the country. Turkmenistan remains the only post-Soviet state without a fully ratified partnership agreement with the EU. Energy is expected to feature prominently on the agenda. Turkmenistan holds the world's 4th largest natural gas reserves and is seeking to diversify its export routes. At present, the majority of its gas exports are directed to China. The European Union is also showing interest in Turkmenistan's renewable energy potential. According to the Asian Development Bank, the country has significant capacity for solar power generation. Any future energy supplies to Europe would require major infrastructure projects, including routes across the Caspian Sea. Turkmenistan has followed the policy of permanent neutrality since gaining independence in 1991. At the same time, since 2022, Ashgabat has intensified diplomatic engagement with Western countries alongside Russia, China and its Central Asian neighbors. And the planned visit to Brussels could mark an important step in the evolution of relations between Turkmenistan and the European Union. Fariza Kalemurzina, Almaty, A-News.
Turkey has marked another milestone in its long-standing relationship with NATO. As the alliance's second-largest military power, Ankara has underscored its role through major deployments to Europe's largest NATO exercise, while preparing to host the alliance's next summit. Adam Morrow reports from Istanbul.
Turkey on Wednesday marked its 74th year as a member of the NATO alliance, highlighting its long-standing role in transatlantic security. The anniversary comes as Turkish military aircraft, naval vessels, and ground forces take part in NATO's annual Steadfast Dart military exercises in Germany, which are set to conclude on Friday. Earlier this month, Turkey had deployed around 2,000 troops, along with aircraft and naval assets, to participate in the large-scale drills conducted under the direction of NATO's Joint Force Command. The deployment marked the first time Turkey has sent such a sizable military force to Northern Europe, a move widely seen as reflecting the country's growing weight within NATO's defense architecture. Steadfast Dart is NATO's largest annual military exercise. This year's drills involve roughly 10,000 troops from 11 NATO member states, including Germany, Italy, France, the United Kingdom, and Spain. The exercises are designed to test NATO's rapid reaction and collective defense capabilities in the event of an unexpected crisis on the European continent. During this year's war games, the Turkish Navy deployed Bayraktar TB3 armed drones for the first time in a NATO exercise, marking what military commanders described as a new doctrine for amphibious operations within the alliance. Turkey joined NATO on February 18, 1952, during the decades-long Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. Today, Turkey fields the second-largest military in NATO after the United States. In July, Ankara is set to host the 36th NATO summit, which will bring together heads of state and senior officials from the alliance's 32 member countries. This is Adam Aro for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
And over to some sports news. Tonight, Azerbaijan's Karabağ FC take on Newcastle United in Baku in the Champions League playoff round. The first leg clash carries historic weight for both sides. Neither club has previously competed in a Champions League knockout tie, making this a milestone moment. Newcastle football team will travel more than 2,500 miles to Azerbaijan, the longest journey ever made by an English club for a Champions League match, and are strong favourites. But Karabağ are enjoying their most successful European campaign to date, with impressive results against major opponents. Kick-off is at 9:45 p.m. local time at the Tofik Bahramov Stadium. Now we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll examine Armenia's deepening engagement with the European Union and its implications for regional peace and balance. We'll see you shortly.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back to A News. European Commissioner for Enlargement Marta Kos is set to participate in the first Armenia-EU summit scheduled for May, following discussions between Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and senior EU enlargement officials. The move signals deepening Armenia-EU engagement at a time of delicate regional diplomacy and ongoing peace talks with Azerbaijan. We examine what Armenia seeks from Brussels and how this shapes the South Caucasus balance. Let's bring in our guest Orkan Nabiev, political analyst from Baku, Azerbaijan. Orkan, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
So what does holding the first Armenia-EU summit signify in practical terms?
It's in the practical, in the political practice, it's a most important meeting for the Armenia because it will be right before elections, general parliamentary elections in Armenia. And it will also shows the big support from the European Union to the Pashinyan's political party. We saw this support from the Vice President Vance, and it will be right 1 month before this meeting will be 1 month before the elections in Armenia. It will be also to show the European Union support for the Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan.
How does Armenia balance EU engagement while managing relations with Russia, traditionally its security partner?
If it would be, let's say, 5 years ago, it will be very hard for Armenia to keep the balance, and it will be very harsh reaction from Russia. But considering right now the Russia losing their position in South Caucasus, for Armenia it become easier and to play with the European Union, and they don't care about the reaction of the Russian Federation. We saw this also during the visit of Alen Simonyan, the Speaker of the Armenian Parliament, to the Russia, and recently meeting with Lavrov and their joint press conference.
And So is it safe to say Armenia is recalibrating away from Moscow?
Yes, we can say so, and we saw that Armenia become more courageous against Russia, and if we consider their how they declare their position against Russia, not only against Russia, they try to declare their position generally, but we noticed that in the subconsciously there's a big messages against Russia. For example, if we consider message of Nikol Pashinyan regarding the railway routes and restoring the railway routes by the Russian South Railway company that ruled by Russian Federation. They have this responsibility to repair their railway routes, but they don't do it. And the message of the Nikol Pashinyan it was that if they don't want to consider their responsibility and they don't want to repair it, we can reconsider and we can sell this railways to other friendly countries. So this subliminal message is always against Russia right now.
And Orkan, as you said earlier, the timing of these talks in May coincide with the elections in Armenia, or they're close. What incentives might Brussels offer Yerevan? Are we looking at economic assistance, governance reform support, or infrastructure investment?
The discussion have moved beyond the general cooperation to the implementation of the Armenia-EU strategic partnership agenda. It's adopted in 2025. This includes 270 million resilience and growth plan to 170 million euros. And it aimed diversifying the Armenia's economy away from its traditional reliance on Russia. So Armenia is seeking to in-deep this financial support, considering that also it will be a 400 million investment by from United States to Tripod. Armenia is seeking to enlarge this financial support and to have the more financial support from the European Union. And it will also help Armenia to reshape their railway roads. It will help to reshape the autobahn system. And yes, Armenia is looking for the big financial support from the European Union to show their electorate that Pashinyan in the right direction and they have more financial investment. So it will be, as I mentioned before, 1 month before election and 1 day after European political conference.
And Orkan, how does this EU engagement intersect with Armenia's peace negotiations or the peace track with Azerbaijan?
The Washington Declaration is much enforced the peace process between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and as we saw that before the European Union was unable to do anything regarding the peace process, but after the Washington Declaration, European Union also became more courageous, became more brave on the peace talks. So this potential support from the European Union became very useful and become visible. And the European Union's enlargement Commissioner Maria Kos also met with the President of Azerbaijan during Davos International Forum and they also supported the peace process between Azerbaijan and Armenia. European Union can support institutionally to the peace process as they used to support it before. They can hold the meetings of the civil society. They can provide their own their experience on the peace negotiations, their experience on how the institutions can work together, how the civil society, how media can work together, because the European Union is constructed based on a big war after the Second World War, the big conflict after the Second World War, and they were creating these ties slowly, economical ties, civil society ties, social ties, business ties, and they can share their experience with these two countries, these two nations in the South Caucasus, to create the new ties between the civil society, business units, political institutions, economic institutions, and create the social ties that can help a strong peace in the South Caucasus.
Okay, so you're saying that EU involvement could possibly accelerate the process. How might Baku interpret the deepening Armenia-EU relationship, and are there risks of over-alignment?
For Baku, it will be a positive message, and it never was a negative message if the Armenia tries to diversify their foreign politics. And for Azerbaijan, it's as much as Armenia became a sovereign country, so it's good. For the last 30 years, Armenia gave its sovereignty to Russia, and they was occupying the Azerbaijani territories because they sacrificed their sovereignty. Right now, Armenia gaining back its sovereignty, and gaining back. I mean that Armenia diversify its foreign politics. It's not only Russia; it's also the European Union. It's also the United States. So that for Azerbaijan is a positive sign that Armenia in deep its relations with the European Union.
Okay, so I know, Orkan, you see it as a positive thing, the EU involvement in the peace track, but what role might EU observers or missions play in future border or confidence-building mechanisms?
I think that apparently after the signing the peace agreement, and this European mission will move away, because for the last 2 years we saw no clashes, skirmishes in the front line. From the February 2024, no man died in the front line, and the role of and we never saw and never heard for the last 2 years any news about the European mission in the borderline. They just disappeared together with news about any kind of the skirmishes in the front line, and they became useless. And after signing this peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, they will leave the region, because they will not. We will not need this European mission in the borderland. It will be a waste of the European monies.
Okay, Orkan, thank you for your analysis today. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for hosting me.
You're up to date with world news for the hour. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned to A News.